Month 3 of the Great Rental Experiment, and we continue to discover different things or different problems or benefits to this whole idea of renting a lot of releases rather than just buying them and blind buying them to see how we go. Stick around, we'll discuss what we've learned this month. Welcome back to part 3 of this Great Rental Experiment. This pretty much for the month of March. I intend to use some time at the end to better categorise what I've learned from this, because this really is an experiment. There are some things, both positive and negative, that are really starting to come to the fore from renting a lot of titles as opposed to watching them. The primary thing at the start was, do I save money? And second part is, does it affect my film watching journey that I have, and especially the types of films that maybe I get exposed to. So first up this month is a release that was originally put out by Vintage Classics line from Studio Canal, and that is Cross of Iron. Now this is a Sam Peckinpah movie, and one that is quite famed as being an anti-war film, and it stars primarily James Coburn. And James Coburn is a leading general in the German or Nazi side of things. And it's interesting that we get to see a prominent Hollywood movie made from the perspective of the German army. We have James Coburn, who's a leading general or high-ranking official, let's say, who's leading a platoon. And they come across, some Russian people, someone killed or otherwise, but there's a young boy that he rescues and takes under his care. And without really going into too much of the film itself, there are a number of themes here about people that are obviously in the wrong side of history but trying to do the right thing. Combine this with the desire and drive of the want for power, so there are people that want recognised for their atrocities essentially that they were part of in the war effort, in the hope that this gives them some sort of glory or notoriety that they can take forward and say that something good comes of it. It's a powerful movie, and actually I've been watching this movie, and it seems like when I watch our film journeys that a lot of people are on the same kind of thing of revisiting a lot of Peckinpah's output. Not in terms of just as famous things like The Wild Bunch or otherwise, but these other things that, I'm not saying nobody's heard of Cross of Iron, for instance, but that people want to revisit the kind of thoughtful nature of Peckinpah's movies. And Cross of Iron is a deeply effective look at an alternative telling of history, especially one that we don't necessarily see very much of. It's a big buy for me, especially for these kind of releases that can be picked up for around £10 anyway. And if you're patient and wait for a sale, they're there. Cross of Iron is a big hearty recommendation. Next up is Idiot Shaw Brothers film, and here's my first real observation that I'll have. I had really thought primarily when I went in that watching something like, in this case, The Flag of Iron, which was one of the Idiot Films Shaw Brothers releases, that this would be perfect for me to rent, because a lot of kung fu films have very similar plots, and therefore once you've seen one and got the enjoyment out of one, then you've kind of seen a lot of what would make it rewatchable. But of course, what I found between watching these and watching the Shaw soap set is that, God, I love Shaw Brothers films. They're eminently rewatchable. They're so much fun, and in fact, of all of these ones that I've seen recently, and there have been a lot of them, I thought I'd made myself sick of them, but I haven't. I just can't get enough of them. The Flag of Iron tells about warring factions. Who wrote the script? This is a new one. The warring factions come together in a setup, and somebody's killed and somebody has to take the blame for it. Somebody's sent away. Sometimes everything that's happening there isn't quite what it appears to be. There's more dastardly and undercover goings on than you would normally think about, and that's the film. I don't think there's anything madly original about the script. Very enjoyable though, and the twists and turns and the characters that it has. I like this kind of bounty hunter aspect of it, as people go to hunt people down and you're not sure who's a baddie, everybody's a baddie, or who's not, and intense fun. It is some of the best flag fighting you'll ever see. I think it's a bit ridiculous in places, but it makes for a really stunning finale, especially with the flag fighting, and I've just kind of come to the point that I just need to pick up all of these Shaw Brothers films because they're all great as far as I can see. And so that's that's part of that. So that's one of the discoveries that I've made, is that I just have to buy those ones. Renting them is not much good, so I bought the next two rather than rent them. For instance, Shaolin Mantis and Monkey Kung Fu. So that was that. Next up was a famed world cinema great, or so I was told or led to believe, and that's Battle of Algiers. Now, Battle of Algiers is by Gillo Pontecorvo, and it's a 1966 film that tells the story of a period of the Algerian War where the Algerian resistance were fighting against the French troops to basically get them out. Now, I usually love this kind of thing, and this one is shot in very much a point of view of the resistance, as a lot of these films are. And we get to see the tactics that they would use to subvert the control, especially as terrorist attacks are happening, and that they used people that would not be searched, so attractive women, to get past guard posts, etc., to plant bombs, but to murder and massacre. And I'd heard an awful lot about it. It's very famed for being an accurate depiction of what actually went on, but it's a bit close to home, I think, for me, especially as I get older. If I'd seen this maybe 5-10 years ago, maybe I would have been more receptive to it. There's no doubting that it's a great film, but it is very reminiscent of what happened at home in a lot of ways for me, except maybe it's in black and white, and you know, the people are different but not different. People fight oppression. So while a very effective film, I found it a difficult watch, and not one that I would necessarily watch again or watch anytime soon. I think it's worthy of watching again, certainly, but not something that I'm going to rush out to buy. For the moment, I'll say sale. So yeah, good movie. Found it tough to make my way through. Talking about tough to make my way through, with Paul Sorrentino's Laurel, which is a dramatisation of essentially Silvio Berlusconi's rise to power and subsequent attempts to stay in power in Italy. Now, Berlusconi is well famed on this side of the globe as being a bit corrupt and, you know, out for himself, that kind of thing. And I fully expected this film to be difficult because of the subject character, but the main person who portrays him is great in it. You get a sense of Berlusconi's will and power, of how he manipulated people and promised them things, and how he used his own aura to do that kind of thing, while also very subtly nitpicking at the things that make it wrong, or that kind of show the audience that actually this isn't just all it's cracked up to be. It's a long film, and maybe overly long, but in those kind of biopic kind of things, without necessarily being called a biopic, how he treats especially young women and objectifies them, paints a point very clearly to say this is not great. This shouldn't be happening, regardless of your position or power, regardless of your stature. This is an abuse of power. And while it's long, it's eminently watchable. It's kind of pokes fun at itself all the time, and I have it. And because it's an artificial eye release, I think here, it's not very expensive to pick up either. So, you know, it's one I did pick up, but not something that I would have necessarily paid £15 for, because I don't know how utterly rewatchable it is, but it is something that I would give to somebody else and say, you know, go watch that. Next up is, well, I'll tell you now, it's the best film I watched from the batch this month, and it actually was recommended to me by my good friend Nathan Jones on the recent Criterion Roundtable that you may have seen with Elliot and Sam. This film is Columbus, and Kogonada is the writer-director. Nathan had told me this was spectacularly good. Now, he had a lovely release of it that had been given in America. We had the network distribution release, which is a great print, but there's very little in the way of extras. There's only really a trailer. So, would it be something that you'd want to pick up? And the answer is unequivocally yes. It's a beautiful, 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 beautiful film. It stars John Cho and Haley Lou Richardson primarily as these couple that kind of meet. John Cho is there. He's called back to Columbus where his father's dying. He's no real relationship with his father, but tradition says that he should be there for that time. And he runs into Haley Lou Richardson, whose mother is not well, partially, but she needs her help and support. And she's basically stopped Haley Lou Richardson's characters from progressing on in life because she feels that she's an onus to look after her parent. And they meet in this kind of crossroads of, that's sort of about attraction, but it's also about a meeting of minds and about ideals. You know, they pick Columbus in Indiana because it's famed for having interesting architecture. Haley Lou Richardson's character has a great love of architecture. John Cho's father is the respected person about that thing, although he doesn't have really the same love for it. So their conversations are kind of at odds with each other, and it's very reminiscent of Linklater's like Be It Before trilogy. You can see how Nathan especially liked it, because to me it's those conversations and those meeting of minds and that relationship as it forms conversation by conversation that's at the very, very heart of it. It's a beautiful film. I think it's a stunning film. It's the kind of film when it receives wider distribution, people will just say this is fantastic. It has a great supporting cast around the place. It is Michelle Forbes of Star Trek fame, and it is Parker Posey in it as well, all playing strong elements of this film, and a really hearty recommendation, and one that should be bought in some stage. I'm a bit in two minds, because there's got to be a better version of this film to find, and if I can get the version that Nathan talked about, I'll pick it up, because it's just a brilliant film. Next up is a film that's released as part of a new label or a new initiative from 101 Films. It's the Agfa film range, and it's the first one that they'd released, and it's Effects. And this was a perfect thing for the rental list. Okay, this is a label, this is a genre film I think I probably won't like, but let's try it. And the Effects, the film is very much a low budget kind of mockumentary film, in that it follows a film crew and a couple of people involved in the filmmaking of a horror film. The question is whether it's a snuff film. Are the people that are being hurt or damaged in the film actually being hurt and killed? And does everybody in the cast know this? And for a long part of it, I think it struggled under the weight of just being interviews between people that worked in situ and people that weren't sitting outside it. It comes together in the end to become quite watchable. I think it comes together very well at the end, but it's not a film that I really have to say enjoyed. It was rough around the edges. Fine, but with 101 releases, chock full of extras, and there's a lot more to dig into here than just necessarily this film. For me, it's not something that I'd be go and pursuing collecting as a range, but I can see an awful lot of people that they're big Vinegar Syndrome collectors or otherwise, that this is right up their street, this low budget filmmaking that see past its ugly bits. And I have to say, and sometimes I am, but low budget slasher kind of things just are not for me. Now, it's not to say the likes of Lady Street Fighter and Zodiac Killer, etc., they're still on the rental list, because I think there is going to be some value to be found here for me as a collector. For some other people, they'll chew it up, but for me, this is going to be a no from me as far as effects go. And then we went on to Les Enfants Terribles, which is a Jean-Pierre Melville film that was released in BFI last year, and that was one that I meant to pick up at the time, but it was released just before Christmas, and because of Christmas and the costs associated with Christmas, I didn't pick it up at the time, and therefore went on the rental list. But I fully expected it to be a film that I was going to really enjoy, an early film in Melville's career, and so I stuck it on, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it, and it's not because the film's not well made, but the idea or the central characters are so unlikable, they're unwatchable. It's basically a brother and a sister who have a sort of incestuous relationship without ever going to that stage, where they're always at each other and biting each other, and they're dragging people into their circle of just misery, it seems to be, of practical jokes that play against each other. It's about getting people in trouble, and this goes on for a long time. It's got a 1 hour 47 run time, and they're just very difficult to be in the company of. Now, if you can see past that or otherwise, then you have a film that's well made, that is thoughtful, and the end and shot. I mean, you could tell Melville was going to be a superb filmmaker, because the whole thing, the way it wraps up at the end, in this twisted love story, ends spectacularly. But the film itself is, it was almost one of those did not finish, had to turn it off. I couldn't stand the main male, but particularly female character at all, and even the subsequent characters that came outside were very whiny, etc. I think there's something to be said for that. Now, the disc itself, I think, is pretty good. There's a great breakdown of Melville's career, and otherwise you know, it's not very long, but 18 minutes or whatever it is enough time to get an awful lot out of it. I think that's particularly good. I think it's an excellent extra, and, you know, credit for putting it on there as well. But for me, the film was a big miss, and I don't know if I could ever rewatch it again. Maybe with the aid of the commentary track, then I would be not so bad, but I'm not in a rush to go out and get it anytime soon. Which brings me on to the last thing that we're going to talk about here in this rental journey that we're talking about, and that is this idea that as a collector, I actually watched back my 2020 top films of the year, my 2021 top films of the year, and in both films I say the same thing, or in both videos I say the same thing, and that is I'm excluding box sets because I start a lot of box sets and rarely finish them. And that's still true. There's loads of them. I mean, I'm halfway through the Chabrol set, I'm halfway through the Shawscope set, etc. Trying to make inroads in there. But what if these box sets or these collections are coming to you through a rental service and you have no control over it, other than to say, actually don't send me that anymore. You know, you can delete it off your list. And that was what I was faced with the Story of Film, the Mark Cousins documentary that is extremely long. That's broken into a lot of parts, but that I knew I would like. I mean, women make film, I love, I adore. This one kind of, rather than just women making films, this is, and a bit different aspects of that, this one's chronological from the start of filmmaking up to the end. And I got all discs sent out to me. That's a bloody great success it is. I mean, it is a great documentary. Fantastic documentary. That actually got better as it went along. I think my favourite part of it was the Kung Fu exploration, especially because I'm in with Sean Brothers so much at the moment. They were talking about Choi Hark and, you know, the people that were involved there. But there was a bit in the middle where, because there's 3 hours each disc, that I kind of thought to myself, I've had enough of this now. I don't want to watch anymore. But yet the next disc that would come out would be the next one in the series, and it forced me to go on through and get into a pattern. And from doing so, I got rewarded. I absolutely got rewarded from it with a great documentary that I may never watch again. That's for sure. The one thing that I will say is that I'm not going to pick this up anytime soon. It doesn't seem to drop in price very much for a start, but it also is one of those things that I feel like once I've seen it, I knew an awful lot about the films that are in it. And the one criticism I'll have of the documentary is that he spoils a lot of films. Some are famous, but some are not particularly famous either. And I think if you're somebody watching that, you're trying to promote people to watch more of those films. I mean, that's gonna be the drive of making that documentary. And there's a lot of them cut to the end and say this is what happens in the end, and that didn't sit right with me. Now, it only happened and spoiled a few films, and sure enough, I probably will watch them still because they're in the collection somewhere to be watched on another label. But I found that that didn't sit well with me. But I really enjoyed the aspect of being forced to finish a box set or a collection. Now we'll see how that goes on forward, because I've just received for the next month the start of another box set, which I'll probably talk about, although they're down as individual films, so I mightn't get them in as regular order as I suspected. But that was an interesting one because I did actually finish that rather than just kind of leave it by the wayside. Which brings me to my last observation, and that is about how it's working out in terms of money. Now, it actually is helping with the money. I am not spending as much on physical media as I am. But part of that is to do with this. And part of it is to do with the fact that actually this regular set of films that are dropping through my door means that I'm not making my way through my own collection with as much regularity as I had been. And because I'm not actually doing that, the discs were starting to pile up beside the TV, which I normally work my way through in good time, and I am at a bit of crossroads with it, I have to say, of these rental discs that I feel I need to turn around quite quickly, or prioritising the stuff that I've got, that I have a plan to watch, that I want to make through. I was making great headway in getting into my indicator pile, but I'm kind of stuck now in just only watching the things that are there because I haven't got the time and make my way through. So I think over the next month this will come to a head. Either I will bring down my subscription level, and at what point it doesn't become as financially viable maybe. I don't know. These are things that need to be explored in the next month, but that's where I am with my grit rental experiment at the moment. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for watching. If you have any comments or any things that you think you should try or maybe focus where I'm at, then please let me know. But other than that, take care. I'll speak to you soon.